Hello, and welcome to The Cursed Compass. Come with me for a moment into the great northern woods, the boreal forests of Canada and the northern United States. It is a place of profound silence and staggering beauty, a vast wilderness where winter reigns with an iron fist. For centuries, the Algonquin-speaking peoples, the Cree, the Ojibwe, the Innu, have called this land home. And from this land, they gave the world a name that has since become synonymous with a unique and terrible form of folkloric horror, the Wendigo.
For most, the story is a simple one, a chilling campfire tale. In the depths of a brutal winter, when game is scarce and starvation is a constant spectral presence, a person might be forced to commit the ultimate taboo, cannibalism, to consume the flesh of another human being. This act, born of desperation, is a spiritual poison. It corrupts the soul, twisting the individual into something gaunt, monstrous and inhuman, a creature of insatiable hunger, cursed to wander the frozen wastes, forever seeking more flesh to devour. This is the Wendigo of pop culture, part zombie, part cryptid, a cautionary tale given monstrous form. The most infamous historical account is that of Swift Runner, a Cree trapper who, in 1879, murdered and consumed his entire family. His defense was simple. He was possessed by a Wendigo spirit. The Canadian authorities, unmoved, hanged him for his crimes. This is the official story, the one you can find on any Wikipedia page. A myth, a metaphor for the darkness of starvation, and a footnote in a criminal file.
But this tidy explanation, this dismissal of the legend as mere folklore, ignores one profoundly unsettling detail. A detail that moves this story out of the realm of myth and into the cold, sterile pages of medical journals. For the Algonquin people, the Wendigo wasn't just a monster. It was a diagnosis. Wendigo Psychosis was, for a time, a recognized culture-bound syndrome, a specific form of mental illness. This is the fact that marks the water's edge. This is where the simple campfire story ends, and our descent begins.
Psychosis. The word itself suggests a break from reality, hallucinations, delusions. But Wendigo psychosis, as documented by missionaries, ethnographers, and even early physicians, had a terrifyingly consistent set of symptoms that go beyond a simple hunger-induced madness. The afflicted didn't just feel hungry. They reported a specific physical transformation. They would first be overcome by a profound melancholy and a morbid brooding. Then came the physical sensations. The most common report was the feeling of their heart turning to ice, a literal, creeping coldness spreading from their chest outwards. They would complain that their flesh was freezing from the inside, even in a warm lodge.
Then came the olfactory element. Those suffering from the early stages and the people around them would report a foul smell, the unmistakable stench of rot and decay emanating from the patient's body long before any physical decomposition had begun. It was as if their very essence was putrefying. Finally, there was the delusion. It wasn't just a craving for any food. It was a specific, obsessive, and irresistible urge for human flesh. They would see the people around them not as family or friends, but as delectable prey. Their lips would grow chapped,
sometimes even peeling back from their teeth in a predatory grimace, an involuntary physical change that terrified observers.
The traditional response to this condition was not confinement, it was not therapy. Often, it was a ritual execution. The community, or a designated shaman, would kill the afflicted individual to prevent them from becoming a full-blown Wendigo and consuming the entire village. They believed they were not murdering a person, but euthanizing a body whose soul had already been devoured. This brings us to Jack Fiddler, an OG Cree shaman and elder who lived into the early 20th century. Fiddler was not a doctor, but a specialist. He was, in his own words, a Wendigo hunter. He claimed to have defeated 14 of these entities in his lifetime. Some were people in the throes of the psychosis whom he killed at their family's request. But others, he claimed, were the creatures themselves, tall, emaciated, unnaturally fast beings he hunted and destroyed in the wilderness. In 1907, the Canadian Mounted Police arrested the elderly Fiddler and his brother for murder. To the authorities, he was a serial killer. To his people, he was a protector against a tangible, recurring threat. And this is the core of the problem. Jack Fiddler's trial represents a fundamental collision of two realities: a world of law, medicine, and psychology clashing with a world of icy hearts, shamanic hunters, and things that walk in the snow. But what if the conflict itself is a misunderstanding? What if the psychosis and the creature aren't two separate phenomena? What if they are merely different stages of the same horrifying process? To understand that, we must leave the well-documented evidence behind and enter the chilling waters of theory.
How can a single legend account for a recognized mental illness, a specific set of physical symptoms, and consistent sightings of a monstrous entity? The attempts to unify these facts have led to some compelling and deeply unsettling theories. The first, and most rational, is the symbolic interpretation. In this view, the Wendigo is not a literal monster, but a powerful metaphor. The academic concept of Wetiko, derived from the same root word, describes a cannibalistic spirit of greed, a psychosis of selfishness that drives individuals and cultures to consume others for their own endless enrichment. Colonialism, unchecked capitalism, environmental destruction, these are all modern manifestations of Wetiko. The Wendigo, then, is a brilliant allegory for the soul sickness that comes from insatiable consumption. It's an elegant theory, and certainly holds a great deal of truth. Its fatal flaw, however, is that it's an intellectual abstraction. It does not and cannot explain the physical sensation of an icy heart, the smell of decay on a living body, or why Jack Fiddler believed he was hunting something with tangible claws and a terrifying speed.
This leads us to a more scientific and perhaps more grotesque explanation: prion disease. Prions are misfolded proteins that cause fatal neurodegenerative diseases. The most famous is Kuru, found in the Fore people of New Guinea, which was spread through ritualistic cannibalism. The symptoms, loss of motor control, dementia, uncontrollable laughter, are horrific. Could Wendigo Psychosis be a North American variant? A prion disease transmitted through survival cannibalism, causing madness and neurological decay. It's a chillingly plausible idea. It provides a biological mechanism for a curse passed through consumption. But it too has a flaw. Prion diseases destroy the brain. They don't typically create a specific, complex, and overpowering craving for the very thing that transmits them. Kuru doesn't make you want to eat more brains, and it certainly doesn't explain the sightings of a 10-foot-tall skeletal figure running through the trees. It explains the how, but not the why. So we are pushed deeper into the theory that the Algonquin people themselves held as truth, the spirit theory. In this worldview, the Wendigo is not a metaphor or a disease. It is an independent, non-human, malevolent entity, a spirit of the winter woods, a being of pure hunger. This spirit does not arise from cannibalism. Rather, the act of cannibalism, of extreme greed, or even just being lost and starving in its territory, can open a person up to its influence. It is a possession. The spirit latches on, first poisoning the mind, then beginning to physically warp the body, turning the host into a vessel for its own endless appetite. This theory is the only one that accounts for all the evidence. The psychosis is the initial stage of possession. The physical symptoms are the spirit's influence manifesting. The executions are a desperate attempt to stop it, and the creature sightings are what happens when the possession is complete, or when the spirit chooses to manifest on its own. It is a perfect, terrifying fit. But it requires a belief in spirits, in an unseen world, and that is a comfortable dismissal for the modern mind. But what if spirit is simply the only word they had for something far stranger? To understand the final layer of this phenomenon, we must stop thinking about monsters and start thinking about the very nature of reality. We must enter the abyss. The word spirit implies something supernatural, something outside the laws of our universe. Let us discard that word. Let us instead consider two far more terrifying possibilities that exist within the framework of physics, information theory, and consciousness. First, the Wendigo as a memetic hazard, a cognitive virus. In this model, the entity is not a physical being, but a piece of self-replicating information. The legend itself is the parasite. The story of the Wendigo, with its specific, terrifying details, doesn't just describe a monster, it creates it in the mind of the listener. Once the meme takes root in a susceptible mind, a mind weakened by isolation, starvation, or fear, it begins to actively rewrite the host's neurochemistry. The belief in an icy heart generates the psychosomatic sensation. The terror of decay manifests as an olfactory hallucination shared by those around them. The psychosis is the information virus reaching its terminal stage, compelling the host to spread the contagion through the ultimate act of social horror, cannibalism. The creature that Jack Fiddler hunted? A tulpa, a thought form, a psychic projection given horrifying temporary substance by the collective belief and terror of a community. It is a monster made of fear. But there is one layer deeper, one final chilling thought. What if the Wendigo is not a product of our minds at all? What if it is an invasive consciousness? Imagine, if you can, a state of being, perhaps from another dimension,
perhaps a fundamental principle of the universe itself that is defined by one single absolute quality: hunger. Not hunger for food, but a conceptual hunger, an eternal, infinite lack, a vacuum of existence. This thing, this principle of emptiness, is drawn to its echo in our world. It resonates with places of desolation, of cold, of emptiness, the frozen north in the dead of winter. And it resonates with people who mirror its nature. The starving man, the greedy man, the soul hollowed out by despair.
It doesn't possess them, it attunes to them. And like a tuning fork causing a nearby string to vibrate at the same frequency, it begins to rewrite them in its own image. It transforms them into a localized avatar of absolute hunger. Their heart turns to ice because cold is the absence of energy. They crave flesh because that is the most direct way to fill an emptiness. They become a walking, breathing wound in reality, a place where the law of conservation of energy is screamingly, terrifyingly defied by a hunger that can never be filled.
The Algonquin people warned of a spirit born of starvation and the bitter cold of winter, an entity that thrived in isolation and despair. But look around. We have built a new kind of wilderness, a world of constant manufactured appetite, an endless scrolling hunger for more information, more validation, more things. We have created a global culture defined by an insatiable spiritual emptiness. Perhaps the question isn't whether the Wendigo is real. Perhaps the real question is, in a world so perfectly attuned to its frequency, have we simply built it a warmer home? And what happens on a quiet night when you finally put down your screen and you realize you're still hungry?